for all intents and purposes, Randy Fine may be the worst legislator in the state of Florida. He's that bad.
Wow.
He's horrible. He's horrible. People don't know because we've been able to keep him to ourselves. But
I mean, you want to talk about a Zionist psychopath? I mean, of the worst kind. Like, this guy brags about dropping bombs.
Well,
like
the law in our state resolution that mimics the federal one about the definition of anti-Semitism, he was that here. Okay.
And what's most perplexing about this particular story is that Wheel has raised a lot of money. Like, he's raised, I think, like somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. Granted, there's no races going on right now, so it's not hard. And of course, Randy Fine is Randy Fine, and of course, he's totally got the endorsement of the Donald. So he's running with that.
Gross.
So we know his campaign manager and finance director. And they put out an advertisement that apparently had a B-roll cutaway of AOC. Now, AOC apparently did not only not like that, but the idea that we have to say Vice Chair of the Democratic Party, David Hogg, and the fact that he decided to put out a statement disparaging this young man who we know, who worked his effing ass off for Jen when she ran against Wasserman Schultz, that this little pencil neck, spoiled child who took advantage of a tragedy for a political gain, this guy's out there writing disparaging, the Vice Chair of the Democratic Party.
He's writing crap about Jackson.
But he's writing crap about a guy who, without question, knows how to run a campaign. And he's telling him that he's a grifter and he's this and he's that. It's like, dude, have you looked in the mirror lately?
No, Jackson is who saves candidates from grifters.
Correct.
He's the one who got me out of shit that I got in because of grifters. So that's
listen, I freely admit this. I ain't going to say the name, but a Bernie grifter found their way into Jen's campaign, and we had to get that person out.
Yeah,
and
we've had some problems.
Is the person who saved us. And thankfully, he has, he really knows his stuff. And I think he puts it at like a 20% shot, which I would say is probably about right. When you really add it all up, he's got the money, he's got the ground game. Randy Fine is absolutely disliked, even by his own MAGA people.
But it's a red district. I mean, let's be real.
So if a miracle happens, it's about a 20% shot, he could pull it off. Right. But you've got the vice chair of the party trying to make sure that he has no chance of winning. It's at some point, you just got to say.
They're shooting themselves in the foot. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because
I mean, it's a dysfunctional situation, right? When you're trying to sabotage people in your own party, against the person, the people who you've identified as being like Hitler-like.
Yes.
That says a lot about your motivations. Yeah. The one last thing, I know we're winding down the conversation, but I think apropos to all of this, the political analyst David Shore just put out this big analysis of what happened in the last election, which is really interesting. It got almost no coverage, and it said a number of things that are like going to be really painful for Democrats to hear. But one of them is that they will no longer benefit by an increase in voter registration. In other words, the more voters that vote now, they actually do worse as that number goes up, as the percentage goes up, because there's been this kind of sea change, particularly with like middle to lower class voters of color, right? So Hispanics, blacks, they're just not voting the same way anymore. And so the traditional formula of let's go out and get as many votes as we can, we do voter registration drives, work on turnout and enthusiasm, and that's going to be how we're going to get elected. That'll actually make things worse in a lot of districts.
Oh, that's what happened here.
Jen, would you like to share with Matt?
Allow me to tell you how in 2000, I forget what year it was, but before
I was running.
But it was before I was a candidate. I went up to our DEC chair in Broward. Now, Broward is like the bluest county in Florida. And at that point, Was. Okay. So I go up to our DEC chair and I'm like, okay, so now that they, we actually sort of have this mandate because, it was right after the midterms. I'm like, okay, so, now what's the plan? And she looked at me and she said, all we're doing is banning assault weapons and registering voters. And that's it. As if she was so annoyed to have to keep answering, like, what's your plan? What are you going to promote? So meanwhile, since then, all our local Dems have ever done in this state is register voters, and they're registering Republicans at 20-1 to Democrats.
Wow.
That's how dumb they are.
20
so
to
they're prioritizing registering voters, and yet the majority of voters, 20-1, are Republicans here. And by the way, most people register as no party.
Right.
So Democrats are actually third. And yet that's all they've been doing is registering voters. So when people want to know why Florida's red, thank the Democrats. They've been out there registering Republicans left and right.
When you lose a statewide race to Rick Scott by 13 points, you got a real fucking problem.
Yeah, that was an incredible result. Yeah. No, and but do you see any evidence that there's a come to Jesus moment happening? I just don't, which is fascinating.
I think it all comes full circle because, you had a job to do. And we probably all share a very similar opinion about Barry Weiss and even probably to an extent Elon Musk. But people just can't seem to do political nuance. Like, that's not allowed. And when something as important as, did these major tech companies deliberately rig the 2020 presidential election against Donald Trump? The answer is yes. They manipulated the algorithm. They made sure that certain stories were only released that favored Biden and hurt Trump. That is how you rig an election if you're not rigging ballots. That's as close as you could get to it today, considering how all of our information is dispersed. And when Elon, for whatever reason, woke up one day and decided this is what he wanted to do, he tasked you with doing this. And what you discovered was mass corruption on an incredible scale that was a global reach. And people called you a traitor and that you're this and that. It's like, well, but it's still true.
It's true. Yeah, I know.
You don't have to like it, but it's still true. Like, right. You cannot tell me that Google did not manipulate the algorithm. Did they do it? Yes, they did. And now we're seeing the pendulum swing in the other direction. We have Doge, which in some respects is probably doing a decent job, but in other respects, it's clearly doing it to the benefit of Elon.
Oh, so of course, yeah.
We've gotten to this point where everyone's thinking that it's yes, I see the world in black and white, and that includes corruption. And that's how everyone should look at this. And that, to me, I think, is the biggest issue here. So there are people that I have no doubt are going to come onto our chat because we get the entire spectrum of politicos.
We do, which I like. We have a very broad spectrum. Yes.
We'll get people that say it was great that you had Matt Taibbi on. And then there will be people that will say you had that traitor come on your phone. It's like they just, and that's where you kind of just have to let it go, because we were behind Force the Vote. We have been very adamant about our opinion about Jimmy, but he was right about the issue. And you have to fight on the lines where you agree. The same is true when it came to Ukraine. We saw what this was from the beginning. This was all about controlling the rich natural resources in the western part of that country. That's why we tried to get them into NATO, so we can control them. All those things that the Biden and Obama administrations had done is now being done in full view of everybody with Trump when he says, we're totally naming it red, white, and blue land. It's like, now it's all out there. Now you can see it for all it's worth. So do you still want to believe that the reason that we're in Ukraine is because Putin's trying to take over Europe? I would like to believe that there's some sensibility with people, but I think what we really just need to do is recognize that there is a huge coalition of populist uprising out there, and we have to get rid of the red, blue lines. Got to get rid of them.
I totally agree with that, and I think once people get used to the idea that the political labels just need to be tossed out and reimagined, there'll be a lot more sense in American politics. I mean, I got called a traitor probably because I was one, in the sense that the people who I was writing about, they really were the bad guys in the story I was writing about. There's nothing I could do about that. But in a different universe, they would just be a small coterie of connected Washington people who just they suck in every direction, right? The larger sort of group of disaffected, disenfranchised people who've been screwed over by most of America, I think they're going to find a collective identity. In line with what you're talking about, which will make more sense than this red-blue thing that we've been pushing.